Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be discussing FIDIC 2017 contracts, mainly focusing on the second edition updates that have happened. We're going to be giving an overview and the summary of what these updates are and have a look at how the document has evolved. For many of us that have been in the construction industry for a number of years already, would have dealt with a FIDIC document of some sort, whether it be a plant design build or a red construction book. And for those that are just starting out, if you want to work in the government industry or large organizations, these are the type of contract document formats that you need to know. So we're going to have a look at the 1999 Rainbow Suite compared to the 2017 Rainbow Suite, which are all the second editions. The contents of this presentation are as follows. We're going to look at the history of FIDIC and its background. We're then going to have a look at the first editions that were released in 1999. We're going to focus some efforts on risk management and when to use which documents. We're then going to have a look at the second editions that were released in 2017. The focus of this presentation, however, is going to be on FIDIC Yellow Book specifically, its overview of the changes that have been made, the reasons for these changes, the complexities that now exist in these documents, the role of the engineer, the dispute avoidance and adjudication board that exists now permanently, and a summary of these updates. The FIDIC headquarters are based in Geneva, and FIDIC now has over 100 member countries. It was formed in 1913 by 3 national associations for consulting engineers. A little bit of history on FIDIC. FIDIC contracts were first issued in 1957. Early contract versions were based such that the red book was relative to civil engineering works, the yellow book was relative to electrical and mechanical works, and the orange book was relative to turnkey or design and build projects. The first editions of the Rainbow Suite, specifically of contracts, were notably the red, the yellow, and the silver books, were only issued in 1999. It should be noted that the FIDIC 1999 contracts are not a revision of any of the previous forms, hence they are called the first editions. Whilst they are still widely used set of contracts, FIDIC decided some years ago that they needed a spring clean, and they set about redrafting these 3 forms. The FIDIC Rainbow Suite is widely used contract format for 2 main reasons. It is capable of being used over a diverse range of legal systems, and it is proactively updated. So let's take a look at what contract types exist within the Rainbow Suite first editions. The more commonly known FIDIC types are the red book, the yellow book, and the silver book, released in 1999. There is also a green book that was released in 1999. Many, however, don't know the other types that exist within the suite, and these are the orange book released in 1995, the pink book released in 2005, the white book released in 2006, the gold book released in 2008, and the blue book released in 2016. The Rainbow Suite exists for various different risk allocation approaches. For example, the red and the yellow books, the employer takes the risk such as unforeseen ground conditions, unforeseeable operations of the force of nature, force majeure such as war, terrorism, and natural disaster, planning and environmental permits, and changes to law. The party who prepares the design generally takes responsibility for its defects. Risk management. All contracts contain risk for both employers and contractors. There is no such thing as a risk-free contract. FIDIC attempts to rationalize and allocate responsibilities for the main risks within the suite through the different types of FIDIC books. A key requirement is for the contracting parties to fully understand the FIDIC general and particular conditions of contracts that set out their responsibilities and risks within a project. Every risk given to the other party, of course, comes at a cost. No party assumes a risk is for free. Let's spend some time on understanding which FIDIC book is best suited to your project. Based on the first editions, this was and can still be done based on design responsibilities as well as operating and maintaining responsibilities once the installation is completed. This process flow diagram lays out the main FIDIC books and the differences between them. If the employer takes on the design responsibilities and this can also be in the form of the employer seeking consulting services to act in the employer's best interests, then the FIDIC Red Book would be used. These are the conditions of contract for construction, for building and engineering works. If the contract is to perform the design, then the decision becomes, is the employer going to be involved on a daily basis? If the answer is no, and the employer opts for a fixed price contract, then all the risk for the turnkey project is shifted to the contractor, and the employer is only responsible for the finances based on the contractor achieving the end goals. How these goals are achieved are then left up to the contractor. These are the conditions of contract for EPC or turnkey projects. If the employer is to be involved on a day-to-day basis, then the question becomes, who is going to operate and maintain the works once the installation is completed? If the installation is to be handed over to the employer, and the employer will be responsible for further and future operation and maintenance of the plant, then the FIDIC Yellow Book is used. Otherwise, if the project includes the contractor responsibility to operate and maintain the works after installation has been completed, then the Gold Book is the best choice. Engineers always prefer drawings and graphs to interpret and understand information. So let's have a look at the risk distribution of the main FIDIC contract types in a graph format. Here we have an x-axis that represents the design by the contractor. On the left, at a 0%, the employer would be taking the responsibility for this design, and on the right hand side, at 100%, the contractor would be taking the responsibility for the design. The y-axis then indicates the risk transfer to the contractor due to this responsibility of design as well as operating and maintaining. We therefore have the red book on the left-hand side indicating design risk as the employer's responsibility, with the yellow and the silver books on the right-hand side where this design responsibility is at the contractor's risk. Comparing the yellow book to the silver book, the contractor's risk is obviously a lot more in the silver book because this is a fixed price contract and the employer is not involved on a day-to-day basis and only looking to achieve the end results, while in the yellow book the employer would be a lot more involved throughout the entire project. FIDIC 2017 second editions. Now that we have a basic understanding of the FIDIC 1999 Rainbow Suite, let's take a look at the updates in the second edition and what exactly they entail. So there are three new contract editions that were published. This is the Red Book second edition, the Yellow Book second edition, and the Silver Book second edition. So these are all still exactly the same color, but they are quite different. So on face value, let's have a look at the different versions and editions and see what they look like. So the Red Book, first off, the conditions of contract for construction, for building and engineering works, where the design is by the employer. We can see that the first edition 1999 has got the FIDIC logo on the front cover, and this has changed somewhat, still looks exactly the same, and it is still red compared to the second edition 2017. Taking a look at the cover of the Yellow Book, conditions of contract for plant and design build of electrical and mechanical works. This is designed by the contractor. We can see that the books are looking very similar, still yellow, and both include the FIDIC logo on the front cover. This is also to be noted is one of the most commonly used in the Rainbow Suite itself. Having a look at the cover of the Silver Book, conditions of contract for EPC or turnkey projects, again still silver, still includes the logo, and the difference you can see there between the 1999 version and the 2017 version. So the first editions have been around for such a long time that everyone was very comfortable with them and almost didn't need to check a clause to know what it was and what was required within the described time periods. So let's now start focusing on what exactly these updates are, and we're going to have a look at the Yellow Book as the focus. The changes are very extensive, both in terms of volume and effect. The 2017 forms are significantly larger, with the FIDIC Yellow Book increasing by 100% in volume compared to the previous editions. So the first edition, 1999, we've got in the column on the left, there were 69 pages in the general conditions as well as the annexures. And there was also an additional 30 pages of guidance. In the second edition, 2017 versions, there are now 126 pages of general conditions and annexures with 68 pages of guidance. In particular, significant changes have been made to the claims administration and the dispute resolution provisions. What FIDIC is trying to do with these new additions is to give those responsible for administering them more clarity as to how the contract should operate. Employers and contractors will unfortunately be required to commit significantly more resources to now administer these more prescriptive contracts. It is so far unclear whether the more prescriptive and thus complex claims resolution provisions will help to resolve claims more quickly or actually add to disputes relating to the interpretation of these provisions and the necessary compliance. So what are the main reasons for these changes? Firstly, they are to enhance the project management tools and mechanisms that exist in the industry. They are also to reinforce the role of the engineer, to balance risk more fairly, to achieve clarity, transparency, and certainty, to reflect current best international practices, to address issues that have been raised since the previous contracts were brought into use, and to introduce the theme of dispute avoidance into the contract. So a summary of the main changes. Comprehensive and new provisions relating to the contractor's programming obligations in addition to that of the central role of the engineer has been reinforced. The contract now provides specific time period for the engineer to carry out his function, and he is now for the first time under the obligation to act neutrally between the employer and the contractor when he performs his functions. The role of the Dispute Adjudication Board, or as it is now called the Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board, in all three contracts, it is a standing board that is appointed throughout the lifetime of the project, and as its new name implies, it is the dispute avoidance as well as dispute resolution function. The yellow and the silver books incorporate for the first time a market standard form of performance liquidation damages, which were not previously included. So let's have a look at the summary of the main changes in point form. Firstly, the volume increase that we discussed previously is definitely due to the greater definitional complexities that now exist for each of the clauses. There's also been changes to the role of the engineer. There's additional project management tools that have been added. The treatment for extensions of time have changed. The variation procedure has changed. Tightening interim payment application procedure, enhanced performance securities provision, limitations of liability, extensive changes to the claims procedure, extensive use of time bars, and changes to the agreement determination by the engineer and the disputes avoidance or adjudication board. So let's delve further into the greater definitional complexities and unpack them. The definitions are now listed alphabetically rather than topically, which makes it easier to follow for novice users, but as we've previously indicated, there is a significant greater complexity and interlinkages that now exist between these definitions and associated clauses. Notably, there has been a departure from the earlier reasonable profit position by the way of insertion of a newly constituted definition, cost plus profit. This is defined to mean the cost plus the applicable percentage for profit stated in the contract data, which is to be 5% if not otherwise stated. Further to this, force majeure has been renamed exceptional risk. Changes to the role of the engineer. The role of the engineer, subclause 3.1, now requires a professional engineer, and not only persons with suitable qualifications, experience, and competence in the main engineering discipline. An engineer's representative has also been introduced, which is subclause 3.3, provides that the engineer can appoint a representative and delegate to him or her the authority necessary to act on the engineer's behalf at the site. If we go back and we have a look at the role of the engineer as per FIDIC 1999 first edition, the employer shall appoint the engineer acting for the employer and shall not impose further constraints on the engineer's authority other than obtaining his approval before exercising duties specified under the contract, such as variations. The engineer makes a fair determination under subclause 3.5. Then there used to be an ad hoc dispute adjudication board, a DAB, which adjudicates disputes on any certificate, valuation and determination of the engineer, as per subclause 20.4, and this was on an ad hoc basis. The role of the engineer in the FIDIC 2017 second edition. The employer shall appoint the engineer, who shall carry out the duties assigned to the engineer in the contract. The engineer exercises duties that do not require the employer's consent without being imposed constraints by the employer. The engineer shall, however, have no authority to amend the contract or to relieve either party of any duty, obligation, or responsibility. The engineer shall not be deemed to act for the employer, but shall now act neutrally between the parties and shall make a fair determination without the employer's consent, as per subclause 3.7. And determinations have now got a 42-day time limit, beyond which there is a deemed rejection, which then turns into a claim dispute. The engineer has the duty to issue interim payment certificates stating the amount that the engineer fairly considers to be due, and has the authority of withholding those payments that he considers not to be due, as per subclause 14.6. The engineer is empowered to inspect the areas affected by unforeseeable physical conditions and give instructions to deal with them, as per subclause 4.12. The engineer has the duty and the authority to agree or determine delays and costs caused by these unforeseeable adverse physical events. The engineer is the manager of the claims procedure insofar as that he or she has the power of giving the initial response to notice of claims to either party in the contract by accepting or failing a notice of claim within a given time of 14 days and with clear reasons. He or she may also reject or accept a detailed claim submitted by either party, as per subclause 20.2.4. If limitations on the engineer are to be imposed by the employer, then they need to be made clear up front. This is very important when there are overarching acts and legislation that can override contract conditions, especially when the employer is a municipal entity and is governed by a Municipal Management Finance Act, and the employer opts to appoint an external consultant or service provider. These limitations can be in the form of approval of variations in terms of cost, time, and scope. The project program requirements described under subclause 8.3 in the new FIDIC 2017 second edition are significantly more onerous on the contractor. The initial program and each revised program shall include the commencement date, time for completion, access to site dates, the order in which the works is to be carried out, including each stage of design, preparation and submission of contractor's documents, procurement, manufacture, inspection, delivery to site, construction, erection, installation, subcontractors' works, testing, commissioning and trial operation, review periods, inspections, as well as remedial works. All activities logically linked and indicating the float as well as the critical path. And contractors are to also indicate proposals to overcome the effect of any delays to date, and this is taken from the NEC contract suite. Nothing in any program shall be taken as or relieve the contractor from any obligations to give a notice under the contract. Let's now have a look at the Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board, otherwise referred to as the DAB, and what effect this now has under the second editions. Subclause 21 refers to the requirement for a standing DAB and not just an ad hoc DAB as per the first editions. The name of the DAB has been changed to Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board, perhaps to give greater emphasis to the DAB's role of avoiding disputes. The DAB has also been integrated into the escalating claims resolution procedure. So underneath we've got a quick summary table that indicates what the first edition ad hoc DAB system looked like and referring to the second edition standing DAB, the differences between the two. So the ad hoc DAB system under the first editions, there was only an appointment made once there was an intention to refer a dispute. The appointment expires when the DAB has given its decision, and there was no prior communication or knowledge that was transferred. The first-hand knowledge of the site conditions was not understood or known by the ad hoc DAB appointed. In the second edition versions, the standing DAB is put in place at the outset of the contract. They are kept on a retainer throughout the entire length of the contract, and they should be copied in all meeting minutes and other documentation that is circulated. And of course, they are able to make site visits as well and determine the site conditions. Disputes can be adjudicated by referral to a dispute adjudication board. The DAB will comprise of 1 or 3 members, the default position being 3, a tripartite agreement, a TPA, otherwise referred to under clause 20.2. So how are the DAB members appointed? The contract may include a list of potential members from which the board is selected. If 3 members, each party nominates 1 member for approval by the other party. Parties and members agree on the appointment of a 3rd member who will be the chairperson. Parties can agree to replace a member at any time, or if a member declines to act, dies, resigns on disability or termination of a member's appointment. Quality Management System, Subclause 4.9. The contractor shall prepare and implement a QM system to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the contract. The QM system shall be project-specific. Monthly progress reporting is described in 4.20 subclause and now requires the contractor to submit one consolidated report to the engineer on a monthly basis. This is significantly more admin required by contractors to consolidate all the project information, and all the inclusions have been detailed under subclause 4.20. This shall include all inspection reports, project program updates, quality management documents, method statements, quality control procedures for manufacture, photographs, and detailed description of progress and things like that. Concluding summary. The updates to the FIDIC Yellow Book are substantial. It appears that many changes to the Yellow Book build on changes introduced in the Gold Book 2008, as well as reflect the success of the NEC3 contract suite to date, which focuses on project management. Some of the most important changes appear to be practical, in particular the updates of the claims provision, which should encourage faster dispute resolution. The importance of the engineer is increased through a robust administrative role with well-defined procedural steps with specific time limits for the necessary actions. This clarity and the time limits are an advantage to both parties, as the engineer and the employer cannot leave issues pending indefinitely. And finally, the same procedure now exists for both the employer's and contractor's claims. The neutrality of the engineer, unconstrained by approvals from the employer when making determinations, will be favored by contractors and breeds confidence in the engineer. The increased use of time bars, together with the greater complexity of claims procedure, are likely to make the new Yellow Book much more resource hungry in terms of administration for all parties, and in particular the engineer. This may also increase the number of claims as parties notify and submit claims to avoid the time bar implications and end up referring disputes to the DAB. The standing DAB arrangement and their involvement throughout the project should, however, allow for faster resolution and reduced delays. Consolidated monthly reports and contractors' programs will require significantly more detail and effort from the contractors. As this video comes to an end, we hope it has been helpful in providing a rough overview of some of the updates one can expect in the 2017 second edition FIDIC contract suite. Please feel free to share this page and subscribe if you'd like to receive similar videos in the future. And as always, if you haven't enjoyed this video, then keep your opinions to yourself. Thanks for watching, and remember, always be better.